And from the title fights, let's move into the rest of the card. Let's get into that featured bout where Diego Lopes continues to take his stardom to the moon. The fight that we were supposed to see back in June at International Fight Week came to fruition here at UFC 306, where we saw the number 3 ranked former 2-time title challenger Brian Ortega welcome the number 12 ranked surging Diego Lopes. And what did we see? We saw Diego Lopes put on a clinic from minute 1 to minute 15. Yes, did Brian Ortega land some shots? Did Brian Ortega have a few moments here and there? Yes, but all in all, Diego Lopes controlled and nearly dominated this fight. Not quite 3 straight dominant fights, but pretty close. Honestly, I could see some people calling this dominant. The more that I think about it and talk here into the microphone, I'm thinking it was actually pretty damn dominant too. In round number 1, Diego comes out, nearly starches Brian Ortega within a minute, drops him with a nasty combination on the feet, then controls him on the ground, was not worried whatsoever about the BJJ skills that Ortega is known for and that he possesses. Round 2, they have a pretty competitive back and forth on the feet. Nothing supremely big in terms of moments. Diego really butchered up the lead leg of Brian Ortega in that second round. And then in round number 3, much of the same as round 2. And then toward the end, Diego again nearly gets the finish over T-City Brian Ortega. To Ortega's credit, one of the toughest guys in this featherweight division. The ref had to step in, right? Way back in the day when he had that title fight with Max. Look at how much he had to go through in the title fight with Volkanovski. The man can take some damage and deal some damage, but he didn't quite deal enough here to make an impact. Diego Lopes now has won 5 straight fights since making his short notice debut in May of 2023, taking the undefeated Movsar Evloev to a very close decision. Since then, hasn't looked back, has had 3 first-round finishes and decision victories over Dan Ige on 4 hours' notice and over a title challenger in Brian Ortega. Now, I will say, compared to the 2 title fights, this one is a little bit more murky in terms of what could be next for Diego because he's on an insane win streak. The resume is really good. Sadiq Youssef, top 15. Dan Ige, top 15. Brian Ortega, top 5, and a former title challenger. The wins are there. The fashion in which he gets the victories are there. He will have a number 3, potentially, for sure number 5 at worst, but I would imagine they probably push him all the way to number 3, ranking next to his name come Tuesday morning for Diego Lopes. So what do we do? Now, I posed the question, much like in that main event, what could be next for Diego Lopes for his next fight? I asked, did he do enough? Has he shown you enough to get a title fight, to get the winner of Topuria versus Holloway, which is happening at the end of October? And in that poll, we saw the results come out to a 73% say yes, he has done enough to get the winner. 27% say not yet, maybe just needs one more fight. Now, if he does need that one more fight, who could it be against? Well, really, the only option that makes sense in terms of momentum, in terms of win streaks, and in terms of storylines would be a rematch with the undefeated number 6 Movsar Evloev. Now, I know a lot of people probably don't want to see that, but come on, guys. Movsar is literally undefeated. He's on an insane win streak in the UFC, has a win over Diego Lopes, short notice or not, close fight or not, it is a win. He probably, in theory, on paper, should be the next title challenger, but being his fight style, being not as active as Diego Lopes over the past 2 years especially, I could see the UFC wanting Movsar to fight one more time, but does he really need to fight like a Yair Rodriguez or a Alexander Volkanovski? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what the UFC wants to do. I'm kind of like rambling here, taking my time because a lot of things are going into my brain as I look at these rankings. So here's what I'm going to say. Diego Lopes, if he gets the next title shot, all power to him. I wouldn't be upset. However, I would like to see him and I would like to see Movsar Evloev both fight one more time. So, whether it's a rematch between Diego and Movzar themselves, I'm cool with that. Number one contender matchup. And if we don't do that rematch, then what do? Do we take Movzar Evloev and pair him up with Yair Rodriguez? I mean, Yair's coming off of a loss to Ortega. Do we pair Movzar versus the former champion Alexander Volkanovski? He's coming off of losses, but they're title fight losses, right? Or do we take Diego Lopes and put him up with Yair? Do we put Diego and put him up against Volkanovski? The matchups all make sense, but what does the UFC want to do when you have Yair coming off of a loss, when you have Volkanovski coming off of multiple straight losses, and then you have Diego and Movzar coming up with win streaks, but have already fought each other and only a year and a half ago at this point? It's a tricky situation. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. What should be next for Diego Lopes and Movzar Evloev? I feel like Movzar just belongs in this discussion. I know he didn't fight at Noche UFC, but with their history, with both of them winning all these fights at the same time, I feel like they're just kind of intertwined together right now. And then you have guys like Volkanovski and Yair kind of on the outside of the discussion, not really in the headlines, in the news lately, but they're still hanging around right there. I know Volkanovski has came out and said he's pretty much guaranteed to get the winner of Topuria versus Holloway without having to fight again. And if that really is the case, then I think you for sure have to do the rematch with Diego and Movzar. But I'm saying a lot of words. I want to hear what you all have to think. But regardless, Diego Lopes is him. And we still have plenty of action to talk about from the rest of this card. Now, I won't go quite as in depth in terms of takeaways and what's next for, the rest of these fights, but they're all getting their shine. We start Esteban Ribovics, Daniel Zellhuber, 2024 Fight of the Year in Noche UFC Fight of the Night. A split decision goes to Esteban Ribovics, who is now 14-1, somehow, some way fends off the, 6, 7, 8-inch reach disadvantage. And these are two guys that love to strike, by the way, so that's a big deal. But he finds his way into the pocket, lands nasty, big-time powerful shots over Daniel Zellhuber. This fight was one for the ages. This fight, just like I said in the preview on Friday, embodied what Noche UFC was all about. No, they're not the biggest name guys. No, they're not superstars, but they are two guys with momentum in the UFC's premier weight class of 155 pounds, and they put on a performance of the year contender. Esteban now is 3-1 in the UFC. All three of those victories are consecutive in a row. Daniel Zellhuber was on a tear in his own right. Someone had to win. Someone had to lose. Both of their stocks skyrocket after this fight, no matter who was coming out as the winner and loser. What a fight. What a performance. And I said on Friday that the winner of this was going to inch one step closer to the back of the top 15. After a fight like this, wouldn't be surprised if Esteban does in fact get a top 15 opponent next. But regardless, my hat is off to two absolute studs, two warriors that left their bodies and their wills and everything they had to give in that octagon last night for those fans in attendance and for all of us fans watching around the world. Ronaldo Rodriguez and Ode Osbourne, the hatred, the animosity throughout the fight week, yelling at each other at the press conference, getting in each other's faces at the ceremonial weigh-ins. I knew that this was going to be fun. It's the flyweights, baby. The flyweights are always going to put on fun fights. Ode Osbourne doesn't know what a boring fight is. Ronaldo Rodriguez is an absolute dog, and he proved that by nearly getting finished in the opening minutes of round number one. Not only does Ode drop him with his lightning fast striking, Ode looked very quick on the feet last night, but then in the grappling had Ronaldo in a triangle choke for 17 minutes, it felt like, in that first round. Ronaldo never went to sleep. Ronaldo never tapped. He turned it around, got top control, landed big shots. Rounds 2 and 3 were not as exciting as round number 1, but still damn exciting. Both of them had their moments. Both of them had opportunities to finish this fight. In the detriment of my bet slip, somehow, some way, it goes the full 15 minutes. Ronaldo Rodriguez gets the victory. He's now 2-0 in the UFC. He's on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight win streak overall. Has not lost since a performance on Dana White's Contender Series in August of 2020. Went back to the regional scene, tallied off 5 straight victories, and now 2-0 in the UFC flyweight division. A top 15 opponent surely is going to be next. Norma Dumont had the best performance of her career, and it was in the biggest moment of her career. She's now won 5 straight fights, none bigger than against the number 5 ranked former title challenger, Irene Aldana. Now listen, I bet on Irene Aldana in this fight because I was going to say I knew, but little did I know what would happen in this fight. I felt that Irene would be the better striker. All she had to do was manage the distance, not get taken down, which I know is a big if against someone like Norma, but I felt she was going to be able to do it because this was a big step up for Norma Dumont in her first true fight in the bantamweight 135-pound division, because all the rest happened at catchweight or featherweight. But instead of Norma grappling or utilizing the clinch like we've seen her do in pretty much all of her UFC fights, she stands and strikes with Norma Dumont, one of the best women's boxers there is, especially in the bantamweight division, and outstrikes her for nearly 15 minutes. The third round was pretty strong for Irene, still not technically enough to get it done on the scorecards. It was a 30-27 unanimous, but Norma Dumont looked powerful, looked fast, looked very clean with her striking. I did not see this performance coming, and as I said, she's now won 5 straight fights, and this came at a perfect time because the title fight in her division happens in 3 weeks at UFC 307, and a number 1 contender fight happens in her division in 3 weeks at UFC 307. Raquel Pennington, Juliana Pena, Ketlen Vieira, Kayla Harrison. Norma Dumont now will be in the top 5 come Tuesday morning. I think you do a rematch with her and Macy Chasson. Both of them are on win streaks. I called for Macy Chasson to actually get the fight with Kayla Harrison. That's not the direction the UFC went. So now pair them together, a rematch a few years in the making. Look, when was that first fight? Let's take a look here. Yeah, so that fight was in May of 2022. So by the time they would fight, probably at the earliest late, it would be like December of 2024. I wouldn't count on that. I'd say beginning of 2025, they could run this back. So Norma Dumont has had 5 fights since that fight with Chasson in May of 2022. That was a split decision, by the way. And Macy has fought 3 times since that May of 2022 date and has won back-to-back fights over former title challenger Mayra Bueno Silva and a victory over Pani Kianzad. The loss was to Irene Aldana. I think it makes perfect sense. Title fight, number 1 contender fight in October. Then obviously those winners will have to fight each other. And in the meantime, while all of that comes together, you get the next number 1 contender solidified, Norma Dumont, Macy Chasson, run it back 3 years or close to 3 years by the time it happens in the making. The winner there gets their title fight. Come on. Matchmaking, baby. There's nothing I love doing on a Sunday morning than matchmaking from the night before. Let's get into Ignacio Bahamondes finishing Manuel Torres, ending his win streak, and he does it with a first-round knockout. 4 minutes and 2 seconds in, Ignacio is now 5-2 in the UFC. He's a Dana White Contender Series alum, and he's won back-to-back fights via first-round knockout. His only losses, Ludovic Klein last August that went the distance, and his UFC debut back in 2021, a split decision to John Makdessi. At just 27 years old, 16-5, 12 of his 16 wins are via finish. Ignacio has always had potential, and in this one, against an ultra-dangerous opponent like Manuel Torres, he really showed that he can evolve fight by fight and take his skill set to the next level. I'm very excited for what the 6'1" lightweight can do next. Ketlen Souza, the biggest underdog of the night that got a victory, was a dog. Got a nasty 1-2 left hook lands that dropped Yazmin Jauregui in the first round, then finishes it by putting her to sleep with a rear naked choke 3 minutes and 2 seconds in to the very first round. Ketlen Souza 15-4, finished 10 of those 15 fights. All 4 of her losses are via stoppage. What does that mean? That means she puts it all on the line every single time out. She's 2-1 in the UFC. She debuted last June and got defeated by Karine Silva, who literally is an absolute savage. She's fighting at UFC 309 against Viviane Araújo, but now back-to-back wins over Marnik Man and a finish over the dangerous Yazmin Jauregui. Big performance. Ketlen Souza, the underdog of the night. Joshua Van and Edgar Chairez. Oh, another just amazing, amazing fight to go down on this Noche UFC card. Joshua Van nearly puts Edgar Chairez away. Edgar Chairez nearly puts Joshua Van away. Somehow, some way, this fight goes the distance. Again, as a detriment to my bet slip. But hey, at least if I'm losing bets, I'm getting fight of the night contenders with him. Joshua is 11-2. He's finished 8 of those 11 wins. He's only 22 years old. He literally just fought July 13th against Charles Johnson and got knocked out. And here he is 2 months later on short notice, and he beats Edgar Chairez in a dogfight war. He's 3-1. He's 4-1, excuse me, in the UFC now. And at that young of an age in the flyweight division, the future, the potential is a very, very high for Joshua Van. And last but not least, to finish off the Noche UFC discussion, the 19-year-old Raul Rosas Jr. opened up the card with a unanimous decision win over Aoriqileng. Now look, was it the most exciting fight? Was it the biggest performance that Raul has had? No, but it was the biggest jump up in competition that Raul has faced so far in his now 4-1 UFC career. Again, guys, he's literally 19 years old. The guy he couldn't leave the Sphere last night and go to a Vegas bar and get a drink because he's not 21 years old. I mean, that is what we're working with here with the 10-1 Raul Rosas Jr., who still has an 80% finish rate. Yeah, he didn't get the finish here, but it was a dominant, semi-dominant. He had to face some adversity. Let me pull back on that. It was a convincing decision victory. How about that? He had to eat some shots from Aoriqileng, who did have some good moments. I believe it was a 29-28 unanimous across the board. So a big win for Raul. He's won 3 straight since losing to Christian Rodriguez. You can't not be excited for what the future can be for Raul, being that he literally still has 4 years to become the youngest champion in UFC history. So give me all of your thoughts on Noche UFC, your takeaways, and what is next in those title fight discussions. I'm just going to pass by how I just said the word those. Don't blast me for that. Merab, Valentina, who is next for the title challenge for both of the new champions, and your biggest takeaways from the rest of the main card, from the rest of the prelims, and your thoughts on this spectacular Noche UFC event as a whole. I think years and years down the line, assuming this is a one-of-one or a very rare occurrence at the least, we will remember this night for a very, very long time. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You can join the community on social media, X, Instagram, TikTok, at Verbal Spar MMA, and you can follow along on your favorite audio listening platforms where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release on Spotify, Apple, and more. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.